So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for your time and for your jumping on to this live LinkedIn event. So let me just go through some introductions. So this is an event called Transparency and Trust, Making Assessment and Learning ChatGPT-proof. My name is Richard Andrew. I'm the host. I run Learn, Implement, Share, which is a professional development outfit for teachers, mostly mathematics teachers, but not all. My big focus is on student agency. I happen to believe that if I'm a teacher in a classroom and my students don't have agency and I'm not doing my best to foster agency in those students, then I am a silly person, because it's making, it's just, if we're trying to teach kids who don't have agency, it's just a ridiculous enterprise. And I think Bridget agrees with this. But anyway, that's sort of my pet, one of my mantras. So our PD is long-term, it's asynchronous online, and there's a lot of implementations that go along with that. So that's kind of what I do. But this session is not really about me. This session is more about Bridget.
Hello.
So Bridget is a senior English teacher and inclusive educator at Brisbane Grammar School in Queensland, Australia. Bridget is currently piloting an innovation project called An Exploration into AI, which will investigate the optimal application of artificial intelligence in student learning. So Bridget, you just want to give a quick, I'll hand over to Bridget in a second, but just want to give a quick hello and what lights your passion wick.
Ooh. Well, hello, everyone. It's lovely to be coming at you from the country of the Jagera and Turrbal people. This land has always been a place of thinking and learning. So what lights a fire up under me, I think, is inclusive education. That's where my interests lie. And so that's why I became really interested in ChatGPT. So I'll make it very clear that I'm not an AI expert. My views are my own, and they're what I think common sense approaches from someone who's on the front line and already grappling with this thing.
Brilliant. And that sort of steals my thunder, because that's exactly the same for me. Let me explain how I came to be hosting these things. True story. So start of the year, everyone's talking ChatGPT, and I've started dabbling with it, and I'm using it in my writing and mainly in, although my first question was, how do I make my single bin worm farm less soggy? I'm not joking. That was my first question. And it came back with this beautiful answer. And I thought, oh, yeah, right, I should do that. Much better than Google. Anyway, I digress. So what happened was I was reading all these articles, and there's a lot of kind of hype and enthusiasm, but there's also concern about assessment. And I'm thinking, well, where are the suggestions? Like, it's okay to talk about this, but where are the practical solutions? So I wrote a couple of posts and an article, and I was deliberately fishing. I was asking for input from people, like, what are your suggestions? And I got none. So I thought, okay, I'm going to find some people who seem to be enthusiastic about ChatGPT and reach out to them and see if I can interview them. And so that's how this has come about. And so this is the second one. Now, Bridget and I go way back, at least 3.5 weeks, because on our first one of these, I don't have a moderator. I'm listening to the person talking, trying to think of the next question to ask, and trying to read the comments and the questions. And I'm a bloke, so I can only do one thing at once. And so I'm not coping with this very well. But I see this one question I did respond to was Bridget's. It just happened to pop up. And I said, oh, let's get Bridget Pearce on, because she's written a really good thing. I just can't even remember what it was now. And we got Bridget on, and instantly I thought, aha, there's a connection here. So we got in touch afterwards, and then we planned the session. So that's how these sessions and how this session has come about, just in case you were interested. Let's just cover a couple of logistics. Now, if you would like to just mention, so Robert Smith, I suspect you're not the lead singer of The Cure, but if you are, you're more than welcome to say that. But if you could just say hi and where you're from, that would be great. Sadly, no, there you go. Cure is one of my favourite bands. And great to see Nora there. Nora and I met a little while ago. If you've got questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll do our best. I can't promise that we'll get to them all, but it may well give us some direction for another session.
Just looking at everyone's comments, I didn't have my chat open. Oh, it's lovely to see everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
So anyway, thanks again for joining. Thanks for your time. Let's get into this. Bridget today did make mention that she was aiming to blow some minds. Let's see. No pressure. So, but would you like just to give a little bit of a background on what's your journey from when you started teaching to here? How did you fall into this position, and what do you love about this role?
Okay, well, I actually got started doing ESL, and I spent some time in South Korea, and following that, I spent 10 years in, I think what you might call a segregated education, alternative education setting for people who had disengaged from mainstream schooling. So they were year 11 and 12 students, but English students. Now, I worked with a lot of students at that school who really struggled to write and really struggled to write extended pieces coherently. And there were some students who felt worthless, who felt stupid. And then when I saw this technology, that's why I was instantly captivated, because I just thought, wow, this is really going to bust down some barriers for these kids. It's going to open doors. So that's why I've become really obsessed with it in the last few months.
Right. Okay. Perhaps we'll open with ChatGPT and the need for student agency, or is there a link between the use of ChatGPT and student agency? Why is student agency important? Just anything around that. If you kick it off, I might add some things myself. If you have questions for me, you can throw them in.
Yeah, well, look, I think that you and I might have slightly different views on agency and how to cultivate it, but I think we both think it's equally important. So I think when I describe it to students, I say it's, student agency is like being the captain of your own learning ship. When you have agency, you get to steer the ship and choose the direction you want to go. You're in charge of the sails and the rudder and the destination. You need to make the decisions about how you want to navigate the waters. And when you don't, it's like being a passenger on a ship that gets taken over by pirates. So someone else is in charge of the ship and you don't get to decide where it goes or how it gets there. I think when teachers promote student agency, they're essentially giving students more control over their journey. They encourage students to take ownership of that learning and make choices about how they want to learn and what they want to learn. So I think that the thing that I'm really interested in and that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about lately is the role of developing purpose in that. So I've been doing a lot of work with my English students lately, trying to cultivate purpose, because I think that might be one key to unlocking student agency. I've been doing this with my English guys, and I modelled what I think my purpose is, and I asked them some questions about their identity as learners and what they value and what their purposes were, and they came up with some cracking answers, just some really good, nice things.
Can you, two things, can you just expand on when you said I modelled my purpose, that bit, and then also give some examples of their cracking responses?
Yeah, so everything that I do is to elevate all students to optimise their impact on the world. Now, that's my purpose that guides all of the decisions that I make. I think I said a similar thing to you a couple of weeks ago, Richard. So that's if I find an opportunity that aligns with that, I'll take it. If I get another opportunity that doesn't align, sorry, thank you, I've got other plans. And I think that as educators, we need to be really quick to come up with an answer for that. We need to model having a very clear purpose, because we want to invite our students to do the same. Having a clear sense of purpose and being connected to that can help them make goals and stay on track to reaching those goals, and give them the drive just to get out of bed every day and remain committed. And if something jumps up and gets in the way, to overcome that obstacle and keep going.
So do you think...
Oh, yeah.
So go on.
You asked for some of their examples.
Before you get there, do you think for some of those kids, they were thinking about the possibility of having that purpose and having that purpose drive them for the first time? That they'd never had it presented in that way before?
Yeah, absolutely, because they found it hard. And, I just have to say, I appreciate that you find this really hard. I've got an advantage. I've been in my career for a long time now, and I've been through uni, so I know where I'm headed. I've had lots of time to think about this. So they were really grappling with that. But gosh, they still came out with some bloody great things.
And how old were these kids?
They are year 12.
Right. So that's exciting, because it's always exciting when it's not just with students, it's with anyone. When you present something, and it's like what I like as a receiver too. Someone says something, I go, "Oh my, I've never really thought about that. I've never, you're making me see things in a different way." So it's exciting when you can bring someone to a new kind of genre of thinking almost. So what were some of their examples? Can you remember off the top of your head, or just the flavour of them?
I had one boy who's just beautiful. He's a boarder at the school, and he said, everything that I do is to make my parents proud and make sure they know that they raised me right, and give back to them for all of the opportunities that they've given me. Another one was, my purpose is to create things that take people's breath away and makes them feel. There was another one that said, everything I do is to advance my understanding of the world around me and learn everything there is to know about the topics that I'm interested in, so that one day I can apply this knowledge to advance the bounds of human knowledge and make the world a better place.
Wow.
They're pretty awesome kids.
So I was going to ask a question. What about this one? Why is student agency important in an AI-enabled world?
I think the framing that we need to look through when we're looking at including GPT in the classroom is, how can you use it while still staying connected to purpose and still staying connected to agency? So how do we keep the human in the loop as the most important content creator and not have all of the heavy lifting done by GPT? I'm just sort of conscious of time, and I've got like a million things to say about how to ChatGPT-proof assessment.
Well, you can just take it. If you've got some bullet points you want to go through, and I'll just butt out. I might take notes and come back to you, but I think you're saying, look, can I not interrupt you for a little while? So, which is fine. Is that what you would like to do? If you would like to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay, so I think what we're looking for is, how do we get students to still do the thinking, still follow an acceptable process whereby they don't allow all of the heavy lifting to be done by GPT, therefore rendering our assessment totally pointless.
Yes.
Now, so I've got some strategies. I've got some not so great strategies and some better strategies. So the first thing that I want to do is to say, first step that I think that teachers should do is trial using GPT to complete the assessment task. So this serves a couple of functions. It will expose the degree to which the assessment can be completed by GPT, and also, really importantly, it will help build the AI literacy of the educator. So I'll give you an example of that.
Sorry, are you saying with no guidelines to the students? Okay, here's the assignment. If you want to use ChatGPT, you can use it. If you don't, you don't? Or
No. I'm saying that teachers need to put the assessment task themselves into ChatGPT and see what the outcome is.
Oh, okay.
To see if it actually can do the task.
Right. So they're not trying it with the kids, they're trying it themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So last week after GPT-4 was released, I asked it to complete a Year 12 English assessment. Now, in this particular experiment, it performed no better than the previous version, which exposed the limitations of GPT-4, which was touted to be much better at completing assessment than its predecessor. Weirdly, that was literally how it was marketed by OpenAI. ChatGPT-4 scores better than 90% of participants taking the bar exam and 99% of people in the biology Olympiad. And that might be the case for those particular exams, but when I got it to complete the senior English assessment, it did not do so great. I asked my students, I actually gave my students the sample that it did, and I asked them to critique it and assess the persuasive speech that was written by GPT-4, and they marked it using the relevant marking guide. And then we moderated as a class, and we decided to award the GPT-4 an 11 out of 25. So that's 44% on the Queensland current senior English task. Now, the good news is if you trial using GPT to complete your assessment task, you might actually find that your assessment is not meaningfully impacted by GPT. An interesting side note there, I also asked GPT to assess the response it generated using the same marking guide that the class used, and it gave itself a 20 out of 25, so 80%. So that's a bit of a sidetrack, but I've heard a lot of educators talking about how GPT can be used to grade assignments, and maybe it can for some, but and maybe you can shape the quality of its output by your prompt. But when I did this with the Year 12 English assessment with the marking guide as a prompt, the grade that it gave was nearly double what it should have been.
So I think from what I can gather, what's coming though is the ability to train your particular ChatGPT version or whatever it's going to be, so you can feed the information in. So then so then I guess it would become more accurate to what you want. But that sort of is not an area that I think we need to go into at the moment.
So can I ask, what are your thoughts, Richard, about banning?
Well, it can't see. This is where it comes down to student agency again. I think banning is. I don't even understand why anyone would think about that, because how do you ban it from home?
Right.
Like, it's just crazy, and it's like banning YouTube, or which was in some schools for a while, or banning the internet. You know, oh, there's a lot of bad stuff on the internet, which there is, so we'll ban it. I mean, we'll ban it from school. Well, you could do that, but hey, last time I checked, it was still in everyone's homes
and on all of their personal devices, right, their mobile
phones.
So
surely, if we're trying to teach students how to navigate the 21st century, and this is clearly not going away. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a raving fan of AI, let me tell you, but it's here. Let's use it. Let's be wise about it and not resist. Can we narrow this issue down? I did have a question here somewhere. So let's say I'm an English teacher or a humanities teacher, and let's say I still used to recently say to students, okay, in 5 weeks' time, you've got to hand in this 3,000-word essay on the fall of Rome, blah, blah, blah. Here's the submission date, okay? Which I know that type of thing shouldn't be happening anymore anyway. But that's a problem, because now we can just put it into ChatGPT, give me 3,000 words, bang, there's my answer, tidy it up a bit, and we're done. But if we so now, obviously, or you should be talking about this because you're in the field. But do you want to take this over about?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few things there. So you've given me an assessment task that's actually really easy to replicate by ChatGPT. Yeah. So some of the suggestions that I have here is one, to make the task based on recent information. So even with Model 4, the model is trained on data dated prior to September 2021. Now, I'm not sure how different subjects will apply this suggestion, but for English, you could get students to analyse or adapt a text that has only come out in the last 16 months, or explore a current issue in a contemporary context. It's important to mention that there are a few ways to bypass the limitation of being able to generate up-to-date information. So, want me to go into that?
Can you just say that again? There's a few ways to
bypass the limitation of it only being able to generate content that's relevant to before September 2021.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's important that teachers are savvy to these types of tricks. So you can use an API called SERPA, presumably there are others as well, that run a Google query for updated information, then feed it back into GPT. Or the other thing that you can do, and I've tried this myself.
Is that SERPA?
Yeah, no, SERPER. So another workaround is to use the bigger prompt size in GPT-4 to your advantage and paste in all of the relevant recent information. So I did this on the weekend. I chose a recent Australian book that wouldn't have too much of an internet presence prior to September 2021. So the book was The Furies by Mandy Beaumont. I asked GPT to analyse it and it struggled. The text that was generated was brief and vague. And then I asked again, and this time I also pasted it into the prompt, all reviews on the book that I could find online from the past year. So keep in mind, GPT didn't automatically have access to that, but I could put it into the prompt. And with that additional rich layer of context, it was able to provide excellent analysis with very impressive language choices because of the quality of the reviews that were pasted into the prompt. So the quality of the output will be determined by the quality of the context that you give it in the input, the quality of the prompts, as well as the quality of the data on which the model is trained.
The question then is, if you were then next week to just ask a similar question, but in a brief form, is it going to be able to draw on that new information?
No, it has a terrible memory. You would need to put it all in again in the same prompt.
Right.
So another strategy that is to add layers of complexity to the tasks. So the more complex the requirements of the task, the less GPT is able to cope with the task requirements. So if you ask it to write you a short story, it'll do an okay job. If you tell it that it's Stephen King and you asked it to write a short story, it might do a better job. But then if you ask it to be Stephen King, follow the structure of the hero's journey, include themes of resilience and grit, and position audiences to take up a perspective on how a sense of purpose can boost resilience, all while using aesthetic features such as symbolism and alliteration and stylistic devices such as capitalization, it is really going to struggle with all of that complexity. It's not going to be able to perform.
Right.
So another thing, so you can make it more recent, make it more complex, and make it more unique. So the more typical the task, like you gave the Rome example, the easier it is for AI to generate accurate text. So I don't think it's enough to just rely on student agency. I think we need to be tweaking assessments to make them more complex, make them more recent, make them more unique. So again, to provide a senior English example, on the prescribed text list, we have wonderful works like The Great Gatsby and To Kill a Mockingbird and Macbeth, and I love them, but there is so much written about them online, available prior to 2021, that assessments about those texts are particularly susceptible to plagiarism by ChatGPT. It's far more challenging, although still possible, to use GPT to plagiarise if the subject matter doesn't have such an online presence. So
are you suggesting that then teachers could start using, I don't know if you're required to use specific text, but can you, for an assessment task, use a text that's not so much online and still have all the breakdown, and that sort of makes it a bit more immune?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think of how other subjects might apply this. Like for geography, instead of reporting on the Murray-Darling Basin, students could report on a local creek. Or for history, instead of studying hugely famous figures, students could look at the influence of those figures on another person whom there are some records of, but whose name isn't the first that comes to mind. Yeah, so ways to make it more unique. The suggestion that I said to you last time, Richard, when I jumped on and hijacked your last webinar, was active monitoring and non-negotiable checkpoints. So,
yes.
It's not as tempting to be dishonest if you know that your teacher has been following your progress every step of the way. And it's also not as tempting to be dishonest if you're making all of your checkpoints and you're not leaving things to the last minute. That's when people get desperate.
Well, I've heard a number of people say, and I'm not in the English space, so it's one of those things I don't think about. But then when I hear this, I think, well, that's obvious. And what they're saying is, you will know how your students write.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you go back pre-AI, someone hands in something, and actually it was on Tom Barrett's last thing that's in the link. Claire was saying that one of the best plagiarism detection devices is a chat.
Mm.
Hey, look, Grace, look, tell me about this work, because I don't know, is it really your voice? It doesn't look like you're writing, and then you question them on it, and without being, authoritarian, you can most of the time you can get to the bottom of what's going on, and so this should be a similar story here.
Mm.
Would you agree with that? Is that sort of a technique?
Yeah, and I think that teachers will need to start having in their classrooms conversations on what is acceptable use of GPT, because I think people will have different expectations on what's fine and what's not fine. So my final strategy, I think, is to require a process journal. So before you were talking about editing and how do we place emphasis on that and document that process, well, this webinar is called Transparency and Trust, and I think this is the transparency part of the equation. So I think we can have open conversations about co-authorship, so students don't have to try and hide anything. Students can document their GPT involvement in a journal. It's not academic dishonesty if the AI is used openly and disclosed. So this will stimulate, I think, class conversations about what is acceptable use of GPT and what isn't.
So can you, so when you say a journal, like, what does that in practice look like?
So I haven't trialed that yet. I'm trialing that in the middle of the year. So that's my next project, to come up with something that that might look like, because I want it to really be a meaningful process.
Is this an online journal, or is it a book that they print stuff out and put in, or what?
Look, it'll probably be online. I think that's the way we do most of these things these days. But in it will require that they disclose what prompts they used, and probably provide a bit of a reflection on whether that was useful or not.
And in this journal, are they kind of somehow circling what, like, here's my starting piece, here's what how ChatGPT improved it, so-called. Here's what I liked and didn't like. Here's what I did with this part, and that's now the next version. And then I put that into ChatGPT because I wasn't happy with this bit. Is that kind of what the journal looks like?
Yeah, I think it will look. I think it'll look like that. I think the really important thing about the journal is that it's going to make those conversations really important. So then as a class, or even, outside of the classroom as a faculty, you can start thinking about, well, maybe that we're happy if students use GPT in the ideation phase, but not the writing phase. Maybe we're happy if we use it to structure, but not synthesize. Yeah. Maybe we're happy if students use it as an editing tool to suggest more concise or clear communication choices. I think these are the conversations that need to be happening right now. I was listening to an interview this morning with Wharton Associate Professor Ethan Mollick, and he tells his students that they must use GPT, but they must declare it and document their prompts. And he says that this lifts the quality of student responses. There certainly shouldn't be any E or D level responses at the very least. Using this technology, the students who struggle should be able to produce something acceptable. The students who get C's should be able to start getting A's and B's. And the students who used to produce great work should now be able to produce excellent work, provided they bring their skills of discernment to the new game we're playing.
So on that point, so you would obviously have dyslexic kids or in any number of those situations which make it hard for them to write. Now, so now all of a sudden they can output a piece of work. If those kids haven't been able to write much in the past, their editing skills, I would assume, are poor. So I'm guessing here. So is the situation ripe now for a refocus, particularly with those kids, but maybe with all kids? Okay, let's talk, like, we can all write, we can all get writing now by using prompts, and we can play around with that. Now we need to really look at how, here's something that ChatGPT put out. How can we pull this apart? Do we even want to use this? How can we make that better? Like, what is that something that you think is going to be a stronger focus? That editing, that improving phase? Or maybe it always has been a big phase. I don't know. I'm not an English teacher.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite right to say the focus will be more on editing. I think the focus will be more toward the assembly of all of the pieces to create something new. So let's use a pizza analogy. Right. So once upon a time, making pizza from scratch might have included not just kneading your own dough, but crushing your own tomato paste and curing your own ham and, I don't know, milking your own water buffaloes to make mozzarella. Now, I love pizza, but I don't have A, the time, B, the knowledge, or C, the experience to be able to do those things in an efficient way. So I outsource those various elements, and then my role is to decide the type of pizza that I want to make, think about choosing the very best ingredients for the job and how to put them all together in a way that will create the optimal final product. And Richard, if you come over to dinner from my house and I serve you that pizza, are you going to assess my cooking and still perceive that to be my work, even though I didn't grind my own olives?
That's a really good analogy, isn't it?
I'm not going to lie to you and pretend that I milked my own buffalo, and you're not going to make the assumption that I did. If we bring this back to assessment, we're just going to have to shift our expectations of the human in the loop.
All right. Yeah, that's great. I like that analogy. That's good. Here's something I've been thinking. Well, actually, before I get onto that, I think in that last session I mentioned, or maybe in one of our chats, I said, because I'm using it, I find ChatGPT really good to make my writing less verbose, right? So I'll put something in and I'll look at it. Mind you, Grammarly does a bit of this as well. And we haven't talked about Grammarly, but I always use Grammarly as the end product, because when you put something that ChatGPT puts out into Grammarly, and you'll see a whole lot of stuff that needs cleaning up. So I'm using ChatGPT, to sometimes it'll blow me away, and I go, oh, that's so obviously the right way to go. But often I'll look at what it suggests, and I won't use any of it, but it inspires me to change what I've written, because it's still another option. And I realize when I write, I don't have anyone else suggesting another option. So even if ChatGPT throws up an option that I think is rubbish, then I look at what I've done. I thought, oh, actually, I should tweak it this way. So I found that really interesting, that even if I use nothing, and it's quite often that I use nothing that ChatGPT throws at me, it still helps. And I find that really interesting, don't you?
Yeah, so I would argue that that is an acceptable use of ChatGPT. Now, do you want to play a game, Richard? Can I throw some lightning round questions at you, and you can tell me if this use of ChatGPT is fine or not fine, and you can help me find the line?
Is there a pass fail? What's the pass mark? Because I'm only interested in the grades, remember?
Okay. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. If a student has written 1,200 words and the assessment maximum word count is 1,000, let's say the student pastes their whole report into GPT and asks it to make the language more concise and cut 200 words. Is that a fine, ethical use of GPT?
Yes, I would say.
Okay.
But I'd also reference that I've done that.
Precisely, yes, okay. If a student has done loads of thinking and typed it all up, but their grammar or punctuation is terrible, then they paste the whole text in and ask GPT to make better grammar choices and use a range of correct punctuation. Is that fine?
Well, I'd use Grammarly for that, but anyway.
Yeah, well, same thing. So is that fine?
Yeah.
Yeah. A student asked GPT.
Like I couldn't function without Grammarly. If it was either remove Grammarly from my word or ChatGPT, I'd say I've got to have Grammarly. It's seriously.
Okay.
I couldn't. Yeah. I'm not an affiliate, by the way, for Grammarly. I'm not on a kickback.
I've got a couple more, and I think they're important because it draws people's attention to this huge grey area of what's okay and what's not that we need to navigate, because we can't just say this was written by ChatGPT and I'm not accepting it, because there are plenty of acceptable uses. I'll give you another one. So a student asked GPT to give them 5 possible structures for their assessment before they pick one and start typing their essay. Is that fine?
Absolutely.
A student asked GPT for 20 possible article titles, and then they pick one and use that in their final. Is that fine?
Yeah, I would say so. How am I going?
Yeah, you're great. I mean, there's no right and wrong answers, but I was asking some of these questions at an English teachers forum a couple of weeks ago, and the panel for the questions that I asked were like, yeah, no, I think that's fine. I think that's fine. I think that's fine. And so it's making me realize, well, actually, we are more okay with this being used in assessment than we actually realize.
Do you know what this is, what you're doing with me now, what's going on in my head? I'm realizing how stupid this notion is. I will ban ChatGPT. What does that even mean? Like it's like they're thinking about it as an on-off button. On, we've got ChatGPT, off, we've got not. But it's not like that. There are so many nuances to this. Hey, I've got something I want to throw at you. Can I?
Okay.
May I?
Yeah.
So I find, you know how the way you're meant to write, apparently, if you want to write an article, apparently what you're meant to do is you write down, or a book, right? You write down the bullet points, everything you want to cover, and then you sit down and you flesh it out, and then you edit it a couple of times and put it through whatever you want to put it through, right? That's how you're apparently meant to write. I can't write that way to save myself. I have an idea of what I want to write, but my creativity only kicks in when I'm writing. It's through the act of writing that my composer comes to life. And I think a lot of musicians would be like that as well. And I wanted to ask you, as the English teacher, how important is the creativity, is the creative aspect for kids when they're writing? And is it possible that we're going to lose some of that? Like, do we still want kids to learn to write and appreciate writing because that's where the creative spark happens for some, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm a weirdo or something. But I would imagine that it's that working thing. It's where the ideas for a lot of people come. And so I just want to throw that out there. How do we not stifle that creativity through using the tool?
I'm optimistic that we won't. I think by writing, that's how I've always thought. I'm terrible speaking extemporaneously. I need to write things down. That's how I extend my thinking, and it's also how I see flaws in my thinking by going back and reading over what I've written, and then I can jump into those flaws. So I think the process of actually writing is really important, and I don't think we'll lose that because it's so valuable. You know, my husband, he'll spend 20 minutes on a Saturday morning writing out a shopping list, and then he won't take it to the grocery store. It's about the process. It's not about the product. He needs to do thinking. No,
but my question isn't, I know we're not going to lose that, but I'm just saying, if we need to be a little bit careful with kids coming in through primary school, high school, that we don't think, oh, well, the writing process is not so important. As long as we can teach them the prompts and they can throw it in there, and then as long as we can show them how to workshop and journal, how they get it better. But I'm thinking, yeah, but it's like I've heard fiction authors say, I love writing because when I go back writing, I find out what's happening in the story because I don't know where it's going. Like I don't know if you've heard of Phil Cummings. He's a children's author. He's a good mate of mine. And I remember when it first happened for him, it was like a before and an after. It's literally happened overnight. And suddenly he was a writer. And he said, Richard, it's like I sit down at my desk And I go into the library and I take a book and I open it, and it's all there, and I just start writing from that book, right? That was his explanation of how that creative process works. And that, I think that's the human element. And I just would be, I think we need to be aware. I suppose what I'm saying is, we need kids to still write, even if, like, to not lose that aspect. Hang on, 5 minutes to the end. Is Bridget able to share her list of points, especially if there is anything she has not been able? In other words, yes. Okay. Do you want to do that? Do you have more points you wanted to share?
I read a post by a terrific writer last week. His name's Rishad Tabakawala, and he adapted the Isaac Newton quote, "Standing on the shoulders of giants," to standing on the shoulders of machines. So I think that's how I'm trying to think about this. How much higher can we reach if we use the machines to give us a boost at the starting point of a project or an idea? And then I love connecting that to what you were just talking about. Maybe it's just the starting point, and then maybe the human element is taking it from there and seeing where it goes.
What if I think it's lovely. What about this question? Let's say I'm a teacher who's just starting out. I've played around with ChatGPT a little bit. I'm concerned that my assessments are probably maybe a bit old school and vulnerable to cheating. What would you say to me? What should I be thinking about changing in the classroom in the next month?
We need to change the assessment. You need to make it more complex, more recent, more unique. You need to tailor those things. Otherwise, you are going to open yourself up to students who is tempted to use the technology to do most of the heavy lifting.
And start talking to the kids about purpose. Start thinking about what can I change so as this is more of a co-creative thing rather than a me versus them. This is a co-creative experience, and bring ChatGPT to the fore. I love your journal, that journal thing. That I think that's fantastic. I think that's a big answer to a lot of this, don't you? So it's the journey is mapped out.
Yeah, I think it's just about making it transparent. If I use it in class, or I'm really open about it. Hey guys, I did this because within ChatGPT because it saved time and blah blah blah. And so I'm just trying to create that culture where we're just really open with each other and we disclose use.
Let's just close on Deepika's comment. So what about the kids who are doing assignments but they aren't using ChatGPT? How should they be marked? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, well, that's a conversation that schools are going to have. I don't have an answer for that. That's going to need to come from the policymakers.
Yep. Hey, Bridget, I think we've run out of time. Thank you for your time. Thanks for everyone on the call. I hope that was valuable.
Yeah, I hope it was. I don't know.
Well, certainly. Just give us a little bit of feedback if you found that useful. Just say so. You don't have to be polite. It's such a big topic, isn't it? And I will timestamp this replay, and I'll send you the link to that. It'll be in an article. So if you want to replace some of what Bridget said at the 45-minute mark or whatever, then you'll be able to do that. But I would recommend you perhaps check out that free course that I've got in the link, and that 24 to 36-minute mark of Tom's last webinar, which gives the background to ChatGPT. I think that's really worth a listen, and those other links are probably worth looking at as well. So thanks, everyone. Bridget, perhaps you and I will stick around and have a bit of a post chat, unless you've got do you have to go rush anywhere right now?
Okay.
No. So thank you very much, everyone. We've officially called this the end.
Thank you, Jolly.
And yes, lots of good things.
Thank you, Ashika.
Wonderful talk. Wait till I tell my 15-year-old that Robert Smith was on the call.